like streams of water in a dry place, like the shade of a great rock in a thirsty land. Hello everybody, this is Gilgamesh, and today we are on Isaiah chapter 32. We're going to take a look at the first part of it here. This chapter is a fairly simple one, but it has powerfully beautiful poetry in it. It consists of 2 poems. The first one is verses 1 through 8, and then the second part of it is verses 9 through 20. Verses 1 through 8 is especially well structured in parallel couplets. So let's dig into it here. Verse 1, Behold, a king will reign in righteousness, and princes will rule in justice. There are 2 cognate accusatives in that verse. A cognate accusative is when the verb and the noun associated with it, in this case, it's actually the subject, but the name cognate accusative implies that it would be the direct object. But at any rate, it is when the noun and the verb come from the same root. We see this in English sometimes with phrases like, I have dreamed a dream. And in English, it might be considered, I don't know, maybe a little cliche or something like that. But in Hebrew, it is beloved. And they do it all the time. And so we have here, a king will king. We don't really have king as a verb in English, so we have to say something like reign or something like that. But in Hebrew, the verb and the noun are both from the same root and sound very similar. Same thing with princes will prince or princes will rule. And so there's just no good way to bring that across in English, but this is what's happening in the Hebrew here. So behold, a king will king in righteousness and princes will prince in justice. We also have the 2 main themes here of righteousness and justice. These are 2 of Isaiah's favorite words here. Righteousness being tzedakah and justice being mishpat. These are a constant theme throughout Isaiah. Now, as we talk about a just king coming in to reign in harmony here, we are picking up the same idea that we had back in chapter 11. Whether this is Isaiah the original, or some scholars would like to put this as a later prophet in the Isaiah tradition, because, well, nobody could agree on how many Isaiahs there are. But we are talking about the same concept of a king coming forward who would be an ideal king. And here he has with him princes, plural here, indicating that there are going to be multiple people in his political empire here that are also going to be ideal. And so we are seeing the idea of a future prophetic king here that will be the perfect king. And this goes a lot to Isaiah's views of Hezekiah and his idea of possibly a future Messianic king that he's been talking about throughout his entire book. We say here in verse 2, each will be like a hiding place from the wind and a shelter from the storm, like streams of water in a dry place, like the shade of a great rock in a thirsty land. We have a lot of interesting storm imagery in these first 2 lines here. We have hiding place. This word only occurs here. A pretty similar word is also found in 1 Samuel 23:23, but it's a very rare word. Mostly we know its meaning because it is parallel to a more common word that is translated as shelter in the next line. But what is clear is that we have some strong water and weather imagery here. The king and his princes are taking a protective role, that we have this storm imagery and they are going to be protecting from the storm, providing a hiding place, a shelter against the power of the storm. It says here each, literally the Hebrew says a man, but this is a common Hebrew idiom to mean each man. And in this case, it seems to refer to the king and his princes, that each one of them is going to serve this role as a hiding place and a shelter. Then we come to the next couplet of lines here. Streams of water in a dry place and like the shade of a rock in a thirsty land. Dry place here, it's very similar to what we had back in Isaiah 25, verse 5. The word here is Sion. It looks just like Zion. Now, there is a slight vowel difference here between the two, but we have to remember that the vowels were all added much later. And so this is interesting. This verse is obviously related back to that passage where in chapter 25 it says, "For you have been a stronghold to the poor, a stronghold to the needy in his distress, a shelter from the storm, and a shade from the heat. For the breath of the ruthless is like a storm against a wall, like heat in a dry place." Dry place being that same word, Zion. "You subdue the noise of the foreigners or arrogant ones, as heat by the shade of a cloud, so the song of the ruthless is put down." There are few translations that render this as Zion rather than dry place. One of them is Smith's literal translation. It says here, "And a man as a hiding of the spirit," going for spirit instead of wind, it's the same word there, "and a covering of the tempest, as brooks of water in Zion, as the shadow of a weighty rock in a weary land." The other really significant place, though, is the Septuagint that also translates this as Zion and not as a dry place. And so we have at least one ancient source that did not understand this as a dry place. Now, the word here that we're translating, it only shows up meaning a dry place in two places, and these are the two places, chapter 25 and chapter 32. Nowhere else does this word mean a dry place. And is it related to the word Zion? We're not clear. There are disputed etymologies for the word Zion. One of them is that Zion might mean a dry place. I don't find that very convincing because, first of all, Zion was founded where it was primarily because there was a natural spring of water there. It seems really odd to name that a dry place. The more likely etymology of Zion is that it comes from a word that means a fortress, a place of defense. And that makes much more sense. It was a well-defended city. It was an ideal spot to build a city. And even long before David arrived there, it was known for its fortifications. So that is, in my opinion, the much more logical idea of the word for Zion. It also could mean a bare hilltop, but I don't think it means dry place. But it's possible that Isaiah here is having a play on words. There is a related word to this that means dry. And that's part of why we get the idea that this should be translated as dry place here. And traditionally, many of the Jewish sages in the Middle Ages understood this to mean a dry place. The idea that it means a dry place here is well established, but it's not universal. And it's possible that we're playing on words here. If we're thinking about these as ideal kings and rulers, then the idea that they will be like streams of water in Zion, that seems to have some significance there. But we have to point out that the second line here says that they'll be like shade in a thirsty land. I will also note that we've gone from the protective imagery of the first couplet, where they are protecting against storm and wind, to now an idea of a refreshing imagery here, that they are providing water and shade to people that are out in heat and dryness. And so we have somewhat flipped the metaphor here from protecting from an oncoming storm to actually providing refreshment and sustenance to people as water and shade. But is Isaiah playing on this here by saying they will provide water in a dry area, but also meaning that they will provide water in Zion? I think it's likely. I think that we are talking about a future king of Zion, and therefore this word is at least a play on words between both the word for dryness and the word for Zion itself, that this future king will come down and provide refreshment, not just to the dry areas, but in Zion itself, that he will rule in Zion. And that is what I believe the Septuagint is aiming for as well in its rendering. We go on to verse 3 here, and we have a little bit of a chiasm here in the first couplet. Then will not look away the eyes of the seers, and the ears of the hearers will give attention. The heart of the hasty will understand knowledge, and the tongue of the stammerers will hasten to speak distinctly. So the first couplet here is this ABBA pattern. We call that a chiasm when the second line reverses the order of the elements. We have here the idea that the eyes of the seers and the ears of the hearers are finally going to start working. This whole line is an obvious reversal of the situation delineated in God's words to Isaiah in his beginning of his prophetic mission, which we saw back in chapter 6, verses 9 and 10, when the prophet is told to seal the eyes and stop up the ears. Here we have a complete reversal of that in this time we're talking about the eyes will be opened and the ears will be unstopped so that they will receive the message. And we also have a reversal in verse 4 here that the heart of the hasty is going to understand knowledge. We have here the interesting idea, the heart of the hasty, those that are rushing. And this is actually the same word that winds up in the name of one of Isaiah's son here, Maher. It's going to be the heart of the person who is going too fast. That person is going to slow down so that they can learn. And then we have the tongue of the stammerers. We're talking about somebody who is unable to speak clearly, that stammers or stutters, that normally would be associated with having to speak very slowly and having long pauses.
We stutter.
That tongue is going to speed up and speak. Using that same word here, that tongue is going to hasten. So we have the heart of those that are moving too quickly is going to slow down, and the tongue of those who can't speak is going to speed up. And so they make very interesting contrasts here in this little couplet in the second part of this here, verse 4. Verse 5, it says, "The fool will no more be called noble, nor the scoundrel said to be honorable. For the fool speaks folly, and his heart does iniquity, to do ungodliness, to speak to the Lord error." So again, in the second couplet have an ABBA pattern, so another brief chiasm there. The first couplet, though, we're saying here that the fool, it's not entirely clear what the Hebrew naval is referring to here. Robert Alter says it's not clear if it refers to turpitude or stupidity. Perhaps rather an excellent combination of the two. And he quotes Joseph Blenkinsop as neatly describing this condition as moral imbecility. So I like that term. We have here moral imbecility here, that the fool is going to no longer be considered the person who is of high rank. That if you have someone who is either foolish or ignoble, they're no longer going to be raised to be the most powerful person in the world, that they will be pulled down. We also have here the idea of the scoundrel. I like that translation. It's just a guess, though. It shows up in verse 5 and verse 7 and nowhere else. It is parallel with the word naval for fool, which gives us an idea of its meaning. It must mean something along those lines, but it's not clear. Also the word for ungodliness here, to do ungodliness. This word isn't clear in its meaning. It might mean something more like hypocrisy. We're not really sure. We also have here the statement that his heart does iniquity. Dead Sea Scrolls actually has a slight variant on this, that he ponders or thinks about iniquity. Slight difference there, maybe not significant. But then, what is the iniquity that they're doing here? What is it that the fool and the scoundrel are up to, or that is the result of their action here, beyond speaking foolishness and speaking errors to the Lord? It says here, to leave empty the soul of the hungry, and the drink of the thirsty deprive. As for the scoundrel, his devices are evil, his plans wicked schemes, to ruin the poor with words of lies, and with speech the needy of justice. This section is a criticism of the current leaders. They are morally corrupt and twist the true religion. At the same time, they are not caring for the poor and the needy. And the last couplet here has a little bit of a legal flavor, indicating that the courts of justice are corrupt. In verse 7 here, where it says, the scoundrel his devices, well, that's actually a bit of a play on words here. It actually says, Kale Kalav Ra'im. And so this Kale Kalav is two words that do not really share the same root, but sound a lot alike in Hebrew, that Isaiah decides to put together, and it makes this little bit of wordplay here. The scoundrel his devices, Kale Kalav Ra'im, are evil. He's got these evil devices, and devices here is actually a very broad word. It means everything from vessels to utensils to weapons to tools. It's a very broad word in what it means. But all of his stuff that he does things with are evil. And he uses them to plan wicked schemes. And what are his wicked schemes? His wicked schemes are to ruin the poor and lie about them, and use his fancy speech to deprive the needy of justice. And so we have that these are excellent masters of language that can go to their court systems and lie and manipulate things so that the poor and the needy, those that are of the lowest classes in society, cannot get justice in those settings. That justice is something that is different depending on class situation. And this Isaiah finds horrible. And then we come to verse 8, where we kind of finish it off here by saying the way things should be. And the noble things plans, and he on noble things stands. Note that the King James Version poorly translates this word nadib, which means nobleman, as liberal. Usually the King James Version translates this word as prince, but for some reason, whatever committee was involved with this one decided to translate it as liberal here. It really means more of a nobleman or a prince. But we're saying here that the noble plans noble things. This is in contrast to the corrupt nobles that have been planning wicked schemes, wicked plans, and that he stands on noble things. So the idea here is that a proper political figure, an ideal political figure, this ideal king and his princes will have plans that are as noble as they are, and they will take their stand on noble principles, and that's how they will govern. So that's the first 8 verses there. Leave a comment about what you think about it, and hit the like and subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one. Shalom.